From the Diary of Bill Lowie, Wednesday, October 28th. Today the outpost of Io Chou was attacked by the VC and another American captain was killed. There were also 4 ARVN troops killed and several wounded. There were no known VC dead. This particular diary entry reminds me of one of the scenes in the middle part of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, when Captain Willard, played by Martin Sheen, goes to a remote U.S. Army outpost looking for information about Colonel Kurtz. There is a particular shot in that scene where Willard is with 3 other men in a trench. They are shooting machine guns, flares, and grenades into the jungle, which is echoing with VC calls to one another. This particular scene is directly inspired by Michael Herr's book Dispatches. Herr's work is considered a work of new journalism, which describes his experiences in Vietnam as a war correspondent writing for Esquire magazine. As a member of the press, Herr was given seemingly free rein to hitch a ride on helicopters or other aircraft and go to any part of the war he wanted to cover. Dispatches is a somewhat complete account of his time over there, focusing on many things he didn't cover while working for the magazine. It can be a bit of a dense read at times, but if you like Apocalypse Now and you're interested, it's worth the read. Outposts such as the one mentioned by Poppy highlight a central challenge U.S. and ARVN forces faced in Vietnam. These were often stationed in remote areas and were logistically challenging to supply and defend, especially when confronted by the Viet Cong's swift and unpredictable attack strategies. Often situated in difficult-to-access regions, small outposts and other military installations were susceptible to enemy forces who knew the terrain intimately and could exploit it to launch surprise offensives. The Viet Cong's tactics here were precise and effective, likely relying on small, nimble units capable of ambushes that would often occur without warning. They typically made full use of local familiarity, both of the terrain and people, moving through dense jungle undetected, frequently managing to vanish back into the landscape after attacking with minimal casualties on their side. For American and ARVN forces, operating out of isolated outposts made reinforcement difficult. Even when help was requested, nearby resources might be limited, and dense terrain or distance further slowed response times. There are only so many people you can fit into a Huey after all. The strategic choice to maintain these outposts came with heavy risks. Although they provided a foothold to monitor Viet Cong activity in certain regions, they remained vulnerable, and losses were high. This environment wore on U.S. soldiers psychologically. Every day, on an outpost, men enduring the high level of unpredictability, wondering if or when the next attack would come. What I find most interesting about this particular entry is that, from what I can find, there wasn't a place that the Army had an outpost in that was called Io Chou. Perhaps Poppy's handwriting is bad here, and I misunderstood it. Perhaps it had a different, official designation that had nothing to do with that name. This misunderstanding adds a level of interest to me, and makes it even more like Apocalypse Now. Captain Willard also found himself in an unnamed outpost on the edges of war, fighting in a harsh battle and taking casualties. How universal was this experience for the men who fought over there? This unknown outpost also serves as a reminder that with this sort of archival work and analysis, there may always be questions. Some may be unanswerable, and that's okay. Life doesn't always provide you with all the answers. Some things may have to live on the frontier, shrouded in mist and mystery, forever remaining unknown. The photo I chose for today depicts ARVN forces in the middle of transporting a wounded soldier in a makeshift stretcher, which appears to be a tarp or poncho. The 6 men are laboriously carrying an injured combatant towards Poppy and his helicopter. From the battlefield, Poppy would have flown to a nearby hospital or airbase with medical personnel who could treat the man's wounds. Though he was not specifically a medical evacuation or medevac pilot, as an operator for Huey, so early on in the war, he was often expected to fly wounded soldiers and civilians to receive medical treatment. Poppy had a series of photographs depicting medical rescues, and none of them depict a wounded American soldier. This forces me to ask, why? What did it say about his relationship with ARVN that he wouldn't mind taking a photo of a wounded Vietnamese man, but not an American? Also, what compels someone to take a photograph in this sort of situation? He was operating a piece of equipment that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars while in a hot zone. What would make him think he had to snap some photos of anything in that sort of situation? What does that say about soldiers in souvenirs? I'm Alex Lowie. and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.